Good evening, and thank you for tuning into our special conclave, Unlocking the Mystery. I'm Natasha Zouves here at NewsNation. In just 4 days, one of the few truly mysterious gatherings of the modern world will begin when 133 cardinals enter the Sistine Chapel locked inside, tasked with choosing the next leader of the Catholic Church. The picking of the Pope, a centuries-old selection process so confidential that the cardinals will be on a strict diet to prevent secret messaging. Yes, notes have been hidden in the food before. The chimney above the Sistine Chapel just newly installed, set to signal the successor to Pope Francis. If no one reaches the 2/3 needed to be elected as the next pontiff, we will see black smoke until the cardinals come to a consensus, which will bring with it white smoke. And you are looking live at St. Peter's Square in Vatican City, where there will soon be hundreds of thousands of spectators waiting for that moment, knowing that a new pope is confirmed. And we start with News Nation's Robert Sherman, who is live on the ground in Vatican City tonight ahead of this historic moment. And Robert, secrecy is still paramount tonight.
No doubt about it, Natasha. And you look at this conclave that is set to take place here, 133 cardinal electors, making this the most diverse and largest conclave in the history of the Catholic Church. And keep in mind, many of them were appointed by Pope Francis himself. Even in this modern day age, you still have so much mystery surrounding the conclave, a process that consists of secret votes, political intrigue, and of course, faith. The toll of the 10-ton campanone, the largest bell inside St. Peter's Basilica, marked the end of Pope Francis's funeral mass, even as cardinals of the Catholic Church from far-flung reaches of the world were still assembling, readying for a symbolic and secretive process known as a conclave, the election of Francis's successor. It's the third conclave of this century, a ritual rooted in mystery, politics, and power dynamics. The fiercely guarded secrecy and high stakes, all very real. Cardinals take an oath of secrecy, the penalty for violating it, excommunication.
Ironically, we know a great deal more about what happened in conclaves 500 years ago because all of those letters are sitting around in state archives in Paris, Vienna, Madrid, and so on. Whereas today, the church is much better at keeping things secret. That's why every cardinal has to give up his mobile phone before he goes into the Sistine Chapel.
Yet there is no absence of technology. Vatican police deploying signal jammers, sweeping for cameras and recording devices. The windows of the Sistine Chapel taped up with privacy film to guard against everything from satellite imagery to AI-powered lip reading. Despite the Renaissance uniforms and axe-bladed halberds of the Swiss Guard, the Vatican's army is in fact armed to the teeth with machine guns and high-tech weaponry to ensure the safety of the sequestered cardinals. Inside, the conclave process has stayed virtually unchanged for 800 years, from the Middle Ages to mid-century.
The conclave of cardinals has reached an agreement. The ancient signal to the world comes from the Sistine Chapel. Habemus Papam. We have a pope.
On Wednesday, after celebrating Mass, the cardinal electors will walk in procession to the Sistine Chapel. There, under the frescoes of Michelangelo, the potential future popes will take an oath of absolute secrecy. The Master of Ceremonies will then expel onlookers with a simple Latin phrase.
Extra omnes.
Everyone out. The doors of the Sistine Chapel will close to prying eyes. The cardinals will sit for the opening vote.
Each of the cardinals writes on a slip of paper which says in Latin something along the lines, I choose as Pope so-and-so. They write it down in their own handwriting, and they are encouraged to masquerade their handwriting. Then these votes are counted, and if there are enough, a new pope has been elected. If there are not enough, they go to another vote.
A cardinal must gain the support of 2/3 of the assembly if he is to ascend to the seat of St. Peter. Hopefuls must straddle shifting alliances and ideological divisions. Conservatives eager for a return to tradition pitted against reformists protective of Francis's legacy. Still for all its earthly spectacle, The conclave is a process believed to be guided by the divine hand of the Holy Spirit.
There will be high drama. They're typically older men who have kind of lived very esteemed careers and know how to speak diplomatically.
Frontrunners are few, but include the Vatican's Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Hungary's Cardinal Peter Erdo, and Cardinal Luis Tagle of the Philippines.
I would not be surprised if it's someone from Africa or Asia, because there's where the faith is strong.
These papal conclaves are very unpredictable. It could be an African, it could be an Asian. This is fantastic, it's exciting.
The conclave will vote 4 times per day. The ballots burned each time until chemically colored white smoke signals a successor. At that moment, the campanone will once again ring out in St. Peter's Square. This time likely to be drowned out by the cheers of tens of thousands of faithful gathered to celebrate the newly elected Pope and a new era for the Catholic Church. The coming days are set to be very critical throughout this whole process because keep in mind, many of these cardinals potentially meeting each other for the first time or hardly know each other at all. And in the coming days, they're having these meetings in which they'll have the opportunity to get to know one another, hear their stories in preparation for the conclave, which begins Wednesday. Natasha.
Yeah, and Robert, you've been on the ground in Rome since Pope Francis's passing. What has it been like on the ground there? Because the loss was great. Do you feel the energy of hope on the verge of the conclave in just 4 days?
Yeah, without question, Natasha, especially as we have now in the early morning hours here in Vatican City reached the final day of the Novem Dialis, the 9 days of mourning for Pope Francis. You do feel the energy changing here from that somberness and celebrating the life of Pope Francis to now looking ahead towards the future. And everyone you speak to here, they all want to know, does so-and-so have any insight? Because people really do want to know who could be next. Who could be that cardinal who ends up becoming the next pope? What direction will the Catholic Church go? These are burning questions that people all across the city are asking tonight. Natasha.
Robert Sherman, live for us on the ground in Rome. Thank you. And for more on the upcoming conclave, I'm now joined by Mountain Butorac, founder of the Catholic Traveler. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight.
Thank you, Natasha.
And Mountain, I know that you met Pope Francis personally 15 times. I mean, first, what can you tell us about meeting the pontiff in person?
Well, the meetings, they were, very casual setting. It wasn't like we were having breakfast or anything. But it was always, it was just a special moment to meet the successor of Peter and to be able to have that experience and bring my family along. So, yeah, it was just always, it was a beautiful moment.
A beautiful moment. Do you think the next pope will continue down his legacy, his path of being a little more progressive, reaching across?
I don't know if progressive is the right term that I would use, even for Pope Francis. He was unpredictable, for sure. But, he never changed church doctrine or anything like that. I think that the next Holy Father will have a tough job following in his footsteps, even so far as like moving into the if they move back into the Apostolic Palace. People are going to be pretty judgmental of that. But I do think that the next Pope needs to be somebody who can make people feel as welcome as Pope Francis did. That was something he was very good at, to make everyone feel accepted, even without making an exception to the people, or the sins or anything like that. But he made them feel welcome in the church, and I think we definitely need that going forward.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, because you have such an interesting background, before your conversion to Catholicism, you had this vibrant career in the music industry. I believe you worked with Missy Elliott, the Beastie Boys, The Cure, and there's this pivotal moment happened for you on a night out with Robert Smith of The Cure. It inspired you to leave that life behind, book a one-way ticket to Rome, and live this life where you help others connect with their faith. What was that pivotal moment that came during that night?
Well, you mentioned Robert Smith. He was kind of my musical hero growing up. And eventually I was working for the record label that The Cure was signed to. And I had a night out with him, and we were at a bar. He was meeting some fans, and I was with him for about 3 hours, and we didn't talk about music at all. We just talked about travel. And I had just taken my first trip abroad a couple months before that, And I realized at that moment that nothing in the music industry was ever going to top that for me. But I had this new love of travel. And so, like you said, I went back to work the next day, quit my job, and left for Italy.
Yeah, and what role has faith developed in your life since then?
For me, I mean, I lead Catholic pilgrimages. And so it's been just bringing people to Rome or to the Holy Land or anywhere all over Europe and seeing them grow in their faith. And that's what it's really been about for me, is sharing the beauty of the Catholic Church with others who travel with me.
And Mountain, you just happened to be in the piazza the morning that Pope Francis passed, and you've been on the ground in Vatican City ever since. What has the energy been like in St. Peter's Square ahead of this election for the new leader of the Catholic Church?
Right. So, I mean, it's an interesting bookend. I was in the piazza when he was elected, and then just by chance, I was in the piazza when he died. I didn't know it at the time because I was there from like 7 to 8, but a couple hours later found out that that's when he had died. But as far as the energy on the ground, it was really odd the day of his death because not a lot of people knew for a while. And so tours were going on. You know, the group leaders were holding their flags in the piazza. And right beside them, there were priests and nuns praying for the Holy Father. And then, you know, over time, there was right after the funeral, I mean, basically the day after the funeral, it just all switched. And the mood got more exciting. Because, I mean, of course, we still mourn the death of Pope Francis, but we're looking forward to the future. And, I mean, the conclave is one of the most exciting traditions in the Catholic Church. And it being 2025 and social media and all of that, I mean, everybody around the world can follow it in real time. And it's been very exciting here in Rome for the last couple of days.
And it's been interesting to see this intersection of Hollywood because the movie Conclave is the #1 streamed movie on Amazon in the whole country right now. Interest has never been higher in this secretive process. And it's one that's understood to be guided by the Holy Spirit. And yet we see it presented on film and in the media as this cutthroat competition, one that is fueled by politics. What is the reality that you can bring us of the Conclave?
Well, Pope Benedict had said that, I mean, the Holy Spirit tries to guide the process, but it's more like a whisper into the ears of the cardinals. And the cardinals, they're men, they have their flaws. And so, of course, there's going to be people that are politicking and maybe trying to get in there. I think for the most part, though, a lot of cardinals especially realize that, you know, that's a big role. And there's a lot that is immediately on the shoulders when you become the Holy Father. There's a room just to the left of the Sistine Chapel. It's called the Room of Tears. And that's because that's where the Holy Father changes into the white cassock before he comes out on the balcony. It's called the Room of Tears because a lot of times they're overcome with emotion on what they're taking on. So yes, there's going to be politicking. There's going to be people having meetings all for the last couple of weeks, like different little cliques of the cardinals are getting together to discuss, like, who do you want? Who's going to be best? What does the church need? So yeah, there's a lot of that going on.
And there's no limit to how long a conclave can last. One in the 13th century apparently took 1,006 days. These elections, you know, just simply are not really that long anymore. We haven't seen one exceed 5 days in the last 100 years. How long do you expect it will be before we have a new pope?
So one reason I think that that's the case now is because they get to know each other ahead of time, whereas 700 years ago, they were just all meeting at that moment, and they didn't really know what each other needed. But yeah, my guess is by Friday morning at the latest, we will know who the next pope is, but it's probably going to be sooner.
Are there any front runners in your mind at this time?
Oh, goodness, I don't know. I try not to speculate because, I mean, it goes up and down. Like one day it's this person, the next day this person gave a good speech in the meetings. So I don't know. I just want somebody that the church needs, basically. Like, and I'm glad that I'm not in there voting because that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and tell me, you've led more than 140 pilgrimages. You've guided hundreds of visitors, you know, who are of the faith. What are you hearing from people about what the church needs in this moment?
Right. So again, somebody that can make people feel welcome. But I think that one flaw that we had with Pope Francis is that he wasn't always clear. So he would make a comment and kind of leave it for interpretation. And sometimes he would revisit that and clarify, but oftentimes he wouldn't. And so people with different agendas, they would just kind of run with that. So I think that we need somebody, and what I'm hearing from a lot of people is we need somebody who makes people feel loved like Pope Francis, but can be very clear as to what they're speaking and what they mean.
All right, Mountain Butorac, really appreciate the time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Conclave's streaming minutes surging since Pope Francis's passing, up 32% in a single week. The feature, not the first time Hollywood has focused in on the Vatican. The young Pope, released in 2016, saw Jude Law play a cardinal from New York, elected as pontiff, with his character immediately challenging the established traditions of the Vatican. And this art, also imitating real life, 2019's The Two Popes, following Pope Benedict XVI, played by Anthony Hopkins, preparing to give up the papacy as he bonds with the cardinal who would soon be known as Pope Francis. I spoke with Deadline's executive editor Dominic Patton about this surge. Here's our conversation. Your reaction first to the surge in Conclave's popularity. It is now the #1 streamed film on Amazon Prime. What about this is just capturing Americans?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. The most obvious one, of course, being the death of Pope Francis. And this gives us, as much as we can get, a window into one of the most important, yet still incredibly secretive elections that happen in the world. So I think for people to get a sense of this happening, to get a sense of a church in transformation, I mean, this is America. We live and die through what we see on our screens, and often that provides us with information, whether or not it's factually accurate or not.
On the one hand, it's interesting. There's such high interest in this, but also these topics are often sacred for many Catholics. I mean, is it playing with fire for any studios to take these sort of topics on? I mean, are these producers and directors aware of thinking about impending controversy when greenlighting projects like this?
Well, I think, look, for someone with a name like Dominic, and clearly my Catholicism enters the room 10 feet before I do, I don't really necessarily think so. I mean, remember, Conclave is based on a best-selling book by Richard Harris, who's written many best-selling books. There was a few years ago, there was the film The Two Popes, about Pope Benedict and Pope Francis, and a fictionalized version of how that transformation and succession in the church happened. There's been many, many, many films about popes over the years in many different ways. Martin Scorsese has a documentary about Pope Francis that he's going to be bringing out posthumously for the Holy Father. So I think one of the reasons why people make these films, to be completely honest, Natasha, is there's a great audience of Catholics and others who want to see them. There's an intrigue, too, in what is, while a state, the Vatican is also, of course, the head of a religion, and the Pope being the head of the Vatican, of course, is the head of that religion. There's a great interest in what happens here. It's still a mysterious, almost medieval-like system in many ways, and people, I think, are always intrigued about what happens behind the closed doors, behind the closed pews. Who are these men, and how does the system work? And that is always great foundation for a drama.
Yeah, to your point, for the second half of Conclave for this film, I was on the edge of my seat, and I didn't even know why. for parts of it, the stakes felt so high. I was holding my breath for many of these moments. And on the one hand, we see this movie was heavily critiqued in some ways. It was also acclaimed. It even won an Oscar. What do you think set it apart? And also, what are some of the critiques? Do you think they're valid?
Well, look, I personally have never been to a conclave. I'm awaiting my cardinalship, but I don't think it's coming anytime soon. And like President Trump, I would like to be the next pope too, but I don't think that's coming anytime soon. But what I will say is this. I think that some of the critiques, like from former Boston Cardinal Sean O'Malley, I think that there's been sense that he says what he participated in 2013 for what eventually became the election of Pope Francis was not at all like the film. Then again, the Vatican never criticized the film. The Vatican provided some advisories to the film. The Vatican actually gave the filmmakers a tour. They did not make the film at the Vatican because you were not allowed to do that, obviously. But, you know, there was a lot of sense of that. But I also will say, though, too, again, Hollywood loves a sure thing. You take a film that is based on a best-selling book, you're almost giving yourself a leg up instantly. And then to build onto that with great actors like Stanley Tucci and Ralph Fiennes and Edward Berger as the director, you know, they constructed a very solid piece of filmmaking here. Good movies are what people like to see at the movies. And Conclave, be it on the big screen or on Amazon Prime, delivers on that, as well as delivers a pope.
Right, the acting was so strong, the cinematography was stunning. Did the film get things mostly right or mostly wrong from what you've been monitoring?
Well, from what I've heard is it got things about as right as you can if you're telling a movie. You know, again, I'll mention Cardinal O'Malley. You know, he talked about a much more contemplative, introspective process that happened. You know, we do know that, for instance, there are sometimes, at least in the early days of the conclave, they will the cardinals will do as much as, I think there's about 135 of them. They'll do as much as 4 votes a day to get to a pope, to have that white smoke coming out the top. But again, this is a process. Some take more than others. There are people right now who are saying they think the upcoming conclave, the real one, will be pretty quick. Being that Pope Francis had been ill for a little bit, his age, obviously, people had been thinking about what was going to happen and who was going to be the Holy Father next. I think that to say what they got accurate, we can only really say, being that none of us have been inside those rooms, we can say this. The Vatican does confirm the basic setup of the vote, the dormitories that the cardinals are in, et cetera, et cetera. We also know at the end there's the white smoke. We also know that sometimes in that process there is black smoke when they have not reached a vote over a conclusion over several days. So I will say this, on that level it was accurate, but it's a movie. It's trying to tell a story in around 2 hours, and so they need drama, and I'm not going to give away the end of Conclave if you haven't seen it, but they need drama to get you there. And I think that is something that they were definitely successful in, and I would say, at least from a drama point of view, a narrative point of view, very accurate.
I mean, that twist was a jaw-dropping moment. And I think what's so interesting, Dominic, is it really gives many Americans who've seen this film a feeling that they really understand the conclave. Like, I feel that I've lived it. It was so immersive. Yeah. And maybe there are some things that got wrong. We'll have to look into it a little more. Dominic Patton, I really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natasha.
Shocking scandals are not just reserved for the movies. We are bringing you the real-life drama, the fistfights among cardinals, plus a conclave resulting in 2 popes, showing the selection process can be stranger than fiction. The details on those controversial conclaves when we return.
The Eternal City acclaims new pope in 1922. Cardinals representing 3 billion Catholics throughout the world gather to elect Supreme Pontiff. Eager and reverent crowds fill vast square in front of St. Peter's, awaiting puff of smoke from Vatican chimney.
That's a look back at the results of 1922's conclave, with Pope Pius VI elected after 5 days of secret ballots cast. This pontiff becoming the first sovereign of Vatican City, as it was declared an independent state during his reign. And that conclave over 100 years ago, not so very different from what will take place in just 4 days when the College of Cardinals is locked in the Sistine Chapel. This is a centuries-old system rooted in secrecy and ritual. And with that comes controversy, conspiracy, even scandal. The upcoming conclave not exempt. Yes, it has not even begun, but the Vatican has already had to do some damage control.
No, non posso dire niente. Scusi.
Sono muto.
Leave me alone, I beg.
Cardinal electors mobbed by the media in St. Peter's Square, their silence only fueling the public's appetite for secrets and anything remotely scandalous. In the age of modern media, the ancient ritual of the conclave is ripe for conspiracy theorists and tabloid reporters. Already, Italian headlines have trumpeted one such scandal, the stubborn insistence of Italian Cardinal Angelo Beccio to attend the conclave as a voting member, despite having been stripped of the right by Francis himself, following Beccio's conviction in a Vatican court for embezzlement.
He announced that for the good of the conclave and in obedience to the Pope, he will not participate in the election of his successor.
He finally withdrew, only after senior church officials suddenly produced 2 mystery letters reportedly written by Francis before his death, reiterating the ban. The letters have not been made public. All of it could easily fit into a Hollywood plotline, but the conclave process has long been controversial.
Well, there have been some pretty disastrous conclaves over the centuries.
Perhaps none more so than the selection of Pope Paul V back in the 17th century, when a fistfight broke out.
The worst one, in some ways, came in 1605, when the cardinals actually got into a fighting match with each other, and they ended up tearing each other's vestments.
A brawl among the elderly cardinal electors over their preferred candidates ending in broken bones. It was the only conclave where someone got hurt, but the controversies go back even further.
There are other conclaves where the outcomes were heavily disputed, either in the moment or after the fact. Particularly in the Middle Ages, there were a whole series of anti-popes, as they're called, kind of rival popes who set themselves up in opposition to the man who appeared to have been successfully elected.
Rival popes arose out of the conclave of 1378, which lasted just 2 days, but began and ended in utter chaos. At the time, the Pope's residence was in France at the Papal Palace in Avignon, which still stands, and French cardinals wanted to keep it there. But a Roman mob of tens of thousands wanted to bring the throne of St. Peter back to Italy. The crowd threatened the lives of the assembled cardinals until they elected Italian Pope Urban VI. He proved so violent, the terrified cardinals soon elected a new pope, a French one. And for nearly half a century, the church was split in two. In the 1903 conclave, the last before the start of World War I, Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph vetoed the leading candidate, which some Catholic monarchs could do at the time. It said he had a grudge against the would-be successor. Instead, Pope Pius X took over the pontificate and quickly outlawed outside intervention, giving rise to the absolute secrecy of the conclave we see in the modern era. Still, not all of the sideshows have been so serious.
There are a lot of anecdotes about cardinals simply getting very bored. The best one of these comes, I think, from 1655, when a couple of cardinals decided to place a bet that they could play a prank on one of the other older cardinals. One of them dresses up as the Holy Ghost in white bed sheets and a saucepan on his head, and sneaks into the guy's living quarters in the middle of the night, but it doesn't really work.
Yeah, that anecdote leaked out to the public in correspondence among the cardinals at the time. And these days, of course, it is highly unlikely we would know any of that. What happens in the conclave stays in the conclave. While betting on the election of the Pope was outlawed all the way back in 1591 by Pope Gregory XIV under penalty of excommunication, it has not stopped modern-day wagers from already rolling in ahead of the conclave, putting money on predicting the next pontiff. And get this, on Polymarket right now, $13 million in bets have already been placed. And these are where the odds stand right now. At the top, Cardinal Pietro Parolin of Italy with a 27% chance. The 70-year-old was Pope Francis's Secretary of State, essentially the Holy See's Prime Minister. Next, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle with 18%. The 67-year-old from the Philippines could be the first Asian Pope. Also in the running, 76-year-old Cardinal Peter Turkson of Ghana with 12%. His selection would acknowledge another area where Catholicism is rapidly growing, Africa. Also at 12%, Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, the 69-year-old Italian, came up as a street priest in the image of Pope Francis, rising quickly to the rank of cardinal. Also from Italy, Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, sitting at 10%. At 60 years old, he is on the younger side, but he's a favorite among Italians who have not had the papacy, by the way, since 1978. And finally, 72-year-old Cardinal Peter Erdo of Hungary at 8%. The scholar and educator is a leading contender among conservatives. Important to note the track record of these predictions, not so great. In the last conclave in 2013, Jorge Bergoglio of Argentina, who would later be known as Pope Francis, was 15th in the running. To get a better picture of the cardinals that could become the next pope, I'm joined by Father Anthony Sorggy of Immaculate Conception and Assumption of Our Lady in New York. And thank you so much for taking the time tonight, Father.
Oh, you're welcome, Natasha. You're welcome.
What do you make of these predictions? Who do you believe that Pope Francis would have wanted?
I'm laughing at the predictions because it sounds like things we do in New York about everything, from beverages on. It's very hard to say. You would think that the Secretary of State, someone like the Prime Minister of the Vatican, would have that edge that you're seeing there because he works so closely with Francis. But there are jobs that the Secretary of State does that wouldn't necessarily make him close in the family sense that we might think. You know, someone very close to the way and the style that he liked to be a priest. After all, Cardinal Parolin is a diplomat, a trained diplomat, and was in various parts of the world. He also is an insider. He knows how to run Vatican City, something that I think Pope Francis made very clear he had no interest in doing, even from his decision not to live in the Apostolic Palace. But to talk about predictions, I'm sure you've heard it already, that we have this expression, if you go into the conclave a pope, you come out a cardinal.
Yes.
And that is true. Case in point, you just mentioned it, Cardinal Bergoglio being whatever it was, 15th or 18th in a list of these kinds of predictions. However, some of the people you mentioned were certainly, and not only to Pope Francis, but to the whole church, someone that people have been talking about, watching how they have risen in their jobs, someone like Cardinal Tagle, for example.
Francis was the first Latin American pope. What are the possibilities of firsts this time around? Do you believe we will see a pope from Africa, from Asia?
I think it is absolutely possible. It is according to what the electors choose to see as a priority. But I think that when the doors are closed, as they have been somewhat in these days of study and getting to know one another, these past days, that while the church was mourning for 9 days the passing of Pope Francis, the cardinals were really also meeting to get to know one another and listen. What are the things that need to be taken care of in the world? If one of those people, like Cardinal Turkson or Cardinal Tagle, fit where they think the church needs to be, then I think that it's not where they come from. It'll be who they are, their personality, their gifts, their talents, and not just whether it's a first.
Much has been made of who is conservative, who is liberal ahead of the conclave. What direction do you see the church heading in?
Oh, boy. Some of these terms fit so beautifully in other aspects of our life, like politics, for example, or we as Americans. They don't fit. Everyone, I think, needs to remember that at the very root, every cardinal is a priest who had very similar training, normally very similar upbringing, whether you were from the streets of Manila or Ghana, West Africa, or here in New York, my own training. I know what they studied. I know where we came from. So those terms don't always fit neatly. For example, I mentioned this afternoon in another interview, Pope Francis would be seen and given these terms progressive, liberal, and yes, some of the things might look that way from our other perspective. But this is also the man who comes home from a long trip, and what does he do? He immediately goes to the Church of St. Mary Major with a bouquet of flowers to do what devoted young people, children would do. They go home to the mother and say their prayers. Believe me, that is not progressive and liberal. It keeps people on their toes. Pope Francis is a good, strong priest in the way that we all know, and yet he's also the priest that could say, who am I to judge, to some of the cutting edge issues right now. So personally, I stay away from those titles.
I hear that.
I don't think they fit a priest, let alone a bishop, a cardinal, or a pope.
Can I tell you what no one is talking about in terms of a possibility for a first?
Please.
There are 10 cardinals from the United States
Yes.
set to participate in the conclave. No one's talking about an American becoming pontiff. Is there just no chance for this year? And why?
We all have our hopes. I don't exactly know why. A part of me, I'm an Italian American and I'm an immigrant son. So part of me thinks that our capitalist democratic system doesn't fit so neatly into the church, at least the European church that has been, even though we love our cardinals. Who's more popular than Cardinal Timothy Dolan? We love him. And he's smart, legitimately degreed.
But you don't think he has a chance? No chance for Dolan?
I don't see it. I don't see this 132 cardinals electing him, loving him, yes, wanting to listen to him, eat with him. Thank God he's a cardinal in the church, yes, but Pope, I don't think so.
Interesting. What we can learn from the late Pope Francis heading into the conclave. Stay with us. The last time we saw that white smoke billowing over the Sistine Chapel over 12 years ago. The election of Pope Francis in 2013, ushering in a new era for the Catholic Church. Born in Argentina, the first non-European pope in over a millennium, and the first from the Southern Hemisphere. The first Jesuit pope known for their missionary work and emphasis on social justice. Pope Francis broke the mold, supporting legal civil unions for same-sex couples, and making statements on current events and conflicts, addressing U.S. Congress, speaking at the G7 summit, all never been done before this pontiff, even the first to take the name Francis, symbolizing humility, caring for the poor, and concern for the environment. And now we look ahead. In just 4 days, the College of Cardinals will walk into the Sistine Chapel, set to select the next pope. A new era again for the Catholic Church. And NewsNation will be there. We will be watching, set to see which firsts will be next for the papacy. We certainly thank you for tuning into this NewsNation special conclave, Unlocking the Mystery. And stay tuned for NewsNation Prime right after the break.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.